All right, you heard it. We are reviewing the Nigeria's outing at the UNGA Assembly, of course, where President Bola Tinubu, representing the ECOWAS community, called on world leaders to deepen relations among UN member states. Of course, that should be in line with the principles of inclusivity, equality, and cooperation.
Well, in a passionate plea to world leaders, President Tinubu called for debt forgiveness for Nigeria and other developing countries, emphasizing the crippling burden of debt that's hindering sustainable development. He was represented by Vice President Kashim Shettima.
Absolutely. And of course, in the same vein, the president also speaking again, not just for Nigeria, but also for the West African sub-region, urged creditors and multilateral financial institutions to prioritize debt relief, enabling developing countries to also focus on vital projects for their citizens.
He stressed the importance of cooperation among nations, warning that individual national interests are undermining global cooperation and threatening the UN's existence.
Indeed, and the president also advocated reforms in the international financial architecture and the transparent multilateral trading system to promote fair and inclusive economic growth.
But President Tinubu also highlighted the devastating impact of terrorism, insecurity and climate change on Nigeria, emphasizing the need for collective action to address these pressing challenges.
So we beckon on you this morning to join us as we again look deeper than the surface of the presentations of our own president at the UNGA summit. We'll be analyzing implications of his proposals or his prayers to the assembly and what specifically they portend for Nigeria, and then of course we'll extend the conversation to the larger ECOWAS community and of course the regional community. We will explore the potential outcomes of this very important moment in our international diplomacy. So on this note, I warmly welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service. I am Claire Adilabu Abdul-Razak and Victor is here.
Well, Claire, this year's address delivered by Vice President Shettima outlined Nigeria's stance on pressing global issues such as climate change, terrorism, and economic development, as we had mentioned earlier. I am Victor, as I join Claire in welcoming you to the program. Of course, we are reaching you on the network service of the NTA. Soon enough, we will have Chukwudi Okoli-Ogbaja join us for the newspaper review, but not until we get highlights of the morning news from Comfort Amod looking good. Good morning, Comfort.
Good morning, Victor and Claire. Good morning, Nigerians. President Bola Tinubu has directed his ministers to embark on propagation of the activities of the administration, including the policies and programs aimed at transforming the country for the good of all. And the presidential media team revealed this at the maiden periodic media briefing at the State House.
Some people feel the government is not doing anything, and government have been doing a lot. And he believes that it is up to them to go out there and blow their trumpets. They should not even wait for people to blow it for them. They should go out and talk about what their ministries have been doing.
The government is actually quite positive and happy that a lot of its programs are achieving desired results, especially in some sectors. For instance, agriculture expanded by 3.2%. We're seeing more enhanced local production. We're seeing a lot more exports. The same things with the telecommunications industry, which has expanded by about 9.1% because of new investments in both digital infrastructure. For instance, they're laying fiber optics across the country.
And the president has cautioned against the consequences of Africa's long-standing profile as a supplier of raw materials to countries of other continents. Extracting raw materials in Africa, he said, has continued to keep the continent in a state of poverty, making it even more undeveloped. The Nigerian leader made the observation while delivering keynote address during the African Minerals Strategy Group meeting on the sidelines of the ongoing 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly in New York, United States. Represented by Vice President Kashim Shettima at the global event, the president highlighted the urgent need for the continent to break free from his dependence, stating that the extraction of raw materials without local processing only deepens Africa's underdevelopment and prolongs its economic challenges. Nigerian's Minister of Solid Minerals Development, Dele Alake, who also spoke at the event in his capacity as the chairman of the African Minerals Strategy Group, said out of the group's vision to transform Africa's mining industry through local value addition and industrialization. The First Lady of the United States, Jill Biden, has bid farewell to visiting First Ladies from other nations, including the First Lady of Nigeria, Senator Oluremi Tinubu, at the 79th United Nations General Assembly. Jill Biden, who hosted the First Ladies to a lunch, described her interactions with them as impactful. And the lunch, she notes, will be the last she will be hosting as the First Lady of the United States during the UNGA. She, however, says the bond they have forged over the years in their struggle to promote peace in the world and attract development to their respective countries will continue beyond next year, January, when she's expected to vacate as the First Lady of the United States.
So those are the kind of friendships that this group forges. These powerful connections we carry with us wherever we go. And as I look around today at all of you, I feel so much gratitude. In your homes and your cities and at summits, you've shown me your hearts. And I hope that you've seen mine in return. Being a first spouse is a unique experience, and I'm honored to have walked this journey with all of you. So as I begin to build my next chapter, I hope that we can stay in touch. And when there are ways that I can help lift up your work or be your partner, please don't hesitate to call me. To our partnership, may it continue to help all people flourish in the world. To our friendships, may they shine no matter the distance between us. Make us smile even when we're apart. And may their warmth remind us that on the path of peace, we never walk alone. Cheers. I love you all.
Analyzing or passing judgment on cases that are sub judice on conventional and social media will henceforth not be tolerated. The Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Kudirat Kekere-Ekun, who got confirmed by the Senate, told the legislators during the screening that she intends to deploy technology in Nigeria's judicial space for efficiency.
Motor Mori Olatukumba Kekere-Ekun is hereby confirmed as the Chief Justice of the Federation of Nigeria.
And the security and well-being of Nigerians are top priorities for the House of Representatives as lawmakers in the Green Chamber commences legislative business for the second session of the 10th Assembly. Speaker Tajuddin Abbas, in a resumption speech, commends President Tinubu for signing the counter-terrorism bill into law, but advocates greater executive legislative synergy to overcome internal security challenges.
Enacting laws that will positively impact the lives of all Nigerians. The House will prioritize several key bills to address critical national issues across security, governance, and environmental protection. The Armed Forces Act Amendment Bill and the Police Act Amendment Bill focus on strengthening Nigeria's security apparatus by enhancing the operational efficiency of the military and reforming the police to improve internal security.
All right, good morning, Nigeria. We'll review Nigerians' participation at the 79th UNGA. this morning. Stay tuned for this conversation. Good morning.
The Secretary to the Government of the Federation and Chairman Interministerial Committee on Nigeria's 64th Independence Anniversary, Senator George Akume FNIMCON, wishes to announce the programs lined up for the celebration of Nigeria's 64th Independence Anniversary with the theme, Reflecting on the Past, Inspiring the Future, as follows. World Press Conference, Thursday, 26th September 2024. Venue, National Press Center, Radio House, Garki, Abuja. Time 10 a.m. Special Jumu'at prayers, Friday, 27th September 2024. Venue, National Mosque, Abuja. Time 1 p.m. Interdenominational Church Service, Sunday, 29th September 2024. Venue, National Christian Center, Abuja. Time 10 a.m. Presidential broadcast, Tuesday, 1st October 2024. Time 7 a.m. 64th Independence Anniversary Parade, Tuesday, 1st October 2024. Venue, Presidential Villa. Time 10 a.m. All invited guests are to be seated by 9 a.m. Announcer Mohammed Idris FNIPR, Honorable Minister of Information and National Orientation, and Chairman, Media and Publicity Subcommittee.
From the Atlantic across the savannah to the Sahara, we rise, a land of the free, we know they tire. We dream great, our spirit is undying.
Resilient, rooted like palm tree, we sway in colors, we turn dark into light, we make solutions, we ignite passion, yeah. Ethnicity is unique, we have more than just a nation.
We are Nigeria, strengthening unity, we know they carry life. We are Nigeria, together live the dream of a land with great destiny. We are Nigeria.
I am the real Nigerian. Brought to you by the National Orientation Agency, NOA.
A new edition of TV Guide is out.
This time, we got up close and personal with the transformational legislator, the Deputy President of the Senate, distinguished Senator Barrow Jibrin.
We've created a difference in terms of representation through interventions that have brought an unprecedented infrastructural development to my area.
This edition is a compendium of mind-blowing stories for your reading pleasure, ranging from technology, entertainment, economy, media, politics, family, and lots more.
It is indeed a park of excitement as we take you through every aspect of life. Pick up your copy and get abreast with issues and trending features within our space.
TV Guide, very incisive, very educative and compelling. Grab a copy at the vendor near you or any NTA station nationwide. TV Guide, your indispensable companion.
We all get that party where they get your back anytime or day. E go carry a matter for head like say na your own. Now so GoTV tanda for your side as your party for correct enjoyment. We not a tear pocket. For this GoTV Super Plus Golden Window, you fit touchlight all the 380 Premier League games, correct local shows, and better film. We day for you. Make your sharply upgrade or recharge your GoTV on top Super Plus to enjoy every today. The Super Plus Golden Window don't come out money now. No do yourself, oh. GoTV. Love it.
You have to move from the point where you protect and defend your religion to a point where you also recognize the rights of the other person, of the other religion, and protect it. So if I am protecting my own territory and my own people and trying to emphasize their rights and protect their rights, I should also be thinking about how to protect the rights of the others.
Both Islam and Christianity recognize and defer to God, and both recognize the temporariness of the life of this world, and that ultimately we all go back to God for the day of reckoning when everybody will render an account of his life on this temporary abode.
This Saturday, FC Bayern Munich, Bayer Leverkusen. Watch live FC Bayern Munich versus Bayer Leverkusen on Sporty TV.
Sporty Bet sponsors coverage of the German Bundesliga.
All right, welcome back to the program. Good morning, Nigeria, live on the network service. Coming up next is newspaper review. Please do stay with us.
And Chukwudi Okoliogbaja is here in the studio. A pleasure to welcome you.
Victor, yes, I am here, and it's a pleasure to accept your welcome.
All right.
How are you doing?
You. I'm all right.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Claire?
Yes.
A little proximity in terms of the colors you've done this morning.
The ladies are always spying on me. They're always doing that, all of them.
Yes, we have become spies. Naturally, we are very intuitive. So
yes.
Well,
let's.
It's a natural gift.
Whatever you say is correct.
Let's get to business.
Let's get on with it.
And we begin with the People's Daily, and it leads with this major story: some ministers, appointees to go. Presidency confirms in imminent cabinet reshuffle. That story is on page 3, and then you see the picture story, which shows Chief of Defense Staff General Christopher Musa in front and others at the graduation and badging of Defense Headquarters Special Force ceremony in Abuja. Well, there are other stories just below the nameplate. Flood, 3 million children in Borno without school. That's according to Save the Children, page 22. Strike looms as ASU issues 14 days ultimatum to FG. That one is on page 4. And reps turned down 300 billion allocation for Borno flood relief. That story is on page 5. 18-year-old boy sets house ablaze after stealing foodstuffs in a lorry. Interesting. Page 7. And extracting raw materials in Africa has kept continent in poverty. That's according to Tinubu. I believe that's part of the hunger speech. And then, still on hunger, 79, Tinubu urges world leaders to deepen ties among member states. That one is on page 20. And finally, from the People's Daily, Pengasan, why marketers can't lift petrol directly from Dangote refinery. That is on page 19. Let's move on to the blueprint. The blueprint leads with the story, 79th hunger. Tinubu urges world leaders to deepen ties as way out of global challenges. Insists on UN Security Council seat for Nigeria. Well, that begins on the front page and ends on page 8. Above that story and below the nameplate, EFCC tackles Bello as ex-governor takes case to Supreme Court. Page 9. In business, average price of 1 kilogram of beans increased to 2,574.63 in August. That's according to MBS. Page 20. And in sports, 100 primary schools to participate in Headmasters Cup soccer tourney. Page 32. As CJN, I'll be remembered for integrity, zero tolerance for corruption. That's according to Justice Kudrat Kekere, warns judicial officers against frivolous ex-parte orders, injunctions. 6 end to pre-election matters at appeal court. And the parrots in the cartoon decided to say, well, I'll be remembered for integrity, zero tolerance for corruption, CJN. The other says, let's wait and see. And finally, Tinubu orders rehabilitation of office for Ministry of Livestock. Page 15, Claire.
I like the story you read about Headmaster's Cup. You know, it takes us down memory lane. But I know Chukwudi will speak to that later on. But let's quickly take a look at the Daily Trust and give you other stories that you haven't heard from Victor. And Daily Trust has quite interesting piece. Okay, it starts with hardship. Civil servants go to work twice a week, and the trending riders there, even feeding is difficult. Only Lagos, Ogun, Osun approve off days. And we pretend we don't know what's happening, director. It will lead to low productivity, analysts. And you can read up this story on page 4. Now, just below the nameplate, why Tinubu can't intervene in Dangote NNPC fuel price feud. And that's coming from the presidency. Now, MSMEs can't survive on current interest rate. That's Fidelity Bank MD. That story is captured on page 23. And if you look at the the picture story there, below that you find published investigation report, discharged female soldier tells the army. And we did talk about this yesterday. That story again is captured on page 10. Now, Kekereko confirmed, okay, we read this earlier on. 2009 agreement, salaries, ASU gives FG 14-day ultimatum on page 8. And Bob Risky, FG probes allegation against prison CJ. Details of that on page 9. Chukwudi, I just allow you to take your lead this morning.
When they say CG, prisons, it is correctional service. It's been like that for years now, no longer prisons.
Thank you, Victor.
Yes.
I hope it actually corrects its inmates as they return to society. I hope they don't get worse.
Those who want to, because you have PhD candidates behind bars now, masters, PhD, some have graduated, you have them who have their PhDs, who have their masters, and they had nothing when they got behind bars. So if you want to, you get involved. Some have learned trades.
Yeah.
And so if you want to really, you learn.
This will make for a good special report.
Oh,
Because,
I agree
follow
with
up.
you.
Because if we do have people who have, graduated from behind the prison walls, I mean, we need to follow up.
I've done this.
Yes.
I've done this a number of times. I've done it.
Yes, but I think we really need to do
I can
something.
see ultimately it has led to Victor beating his chest over reportage. No problem.
Yes,
God did.
but well done if you have. But
Well done,
I think
Victor, but it's a good humanized.
human.
Oh my,
Yes.
I mean, it can't
Yes.
all be condign punishment for
Yes.
that criminal, blah, blah, blah. When you get into the
We
prison...
need to follow up, even follow up on them. Rehabilitation, reintegration into the system, because it's always very difficult. Once you go behind the bars, it's a tag. It becomes there's a stigma, and we've been trying to fight the stigma,
particularly on our shows,
exactly.
on the shows of
It
Africa.
would be also good to
It's
know.
a good one.
Yes,
it's really a good one.
Yes. Please go ahead.
Civil servants go to work twice a week, as if we don't know this. Some of them get in my car when I do come over here, and I say, how do you manage to keep going to work? They say, okay, you can see the roads are dry. It's just a few of us that actually... It's an open secret. When was it Ondo and Edo that started 3 days a week? And we said it will lead to less productivity, a real decrease in what at the end of the day, it is the reality the civil servant faces that would inform how he or she lives their life.
I think we should also not generalize, because when we say civil servants, now you have grouped all civil servants. There are some civil servants who still do.
I was going to say that when Claire was reading it, and I was wondering, am I really a civil servant?
Those are not the civil servants we're talking about.
The core civil servants.
And their percentage is quite minimal compared to the workforce that generally gets called the civil service. Well, of course, they're affiliated. But on the whole, the point we're making is that they simply do not have the means to go to work on a daily basis anymore. Let's not pretend about it. Actually, 3 states, is it Lagos, Ogun, and
Osun?
They've actually approved off days, both for senior and lower categories. That is facing the fact of your life, you understand? But the point at the end of the day is, if prices have gone up so much that the civil servant feels hemmed in by unnatural circumstance, what is coming to alleviate the hardship? Where is the minimum wage, for instance? Let us hasten its implementation so that people would really feel a reprieve. It's very important. I know it's not easy for government. It's quite obvious it's not easy for them.
I just imagine a civil servant in Lagos living on the mainland, maybe because houses on the island are expensive, and then you have to work on the island because that's where a large chunk of the industries are. You can imagine going from mainland to the island.
You can.
What it will cost you per day.
We're talking the civil service now. I went to teach English phonetics at a school, and I found out some of the pupils were not there anymore. They said their parents had decided to relocate them in schools that are closer, nearer to their homes, as a way of tackling the transportation problems.
I've had to do the same.
Well,
that's it.
Well, they say when the going gets tough,
the tough gets going. We're not going to give in. I will be remembered
and we have weathered the storm so far.
We'll finish the job.
Resilience, we'll finish
God
the
willing.
Job. Yes, we will.
I will be remembered for integrity, zero tolerance for corruption. I like that coming from the new CJN. What do you think? I think it's a good one. Chief Justice,
the parrot here says we should wait and see.
We should wait and see. Let's not be cynical.
Well, actually, we wish her. Someone remarked about her countenance, her composure, and her intelligence. The intelligence she displayed while responding to the questions, put across to her by the Senate, and of course how intelligently she answered, the questions. And so, if that is so, then we might see some changes. But again, we've had many women come, as Chief Justice of Nigeria, take up that position, and then they've also gone.
But it's not so difficult to decipher. I mean, to tell whether she's going to do what she says. What is her track record? People don't suddenly become crusaders against corruption. It's always a DNA thing. It's always something that they are known for.
But even her predecessors,
that's the point.
Equally have track records.
Exactly.
So what I think what
sometimes
we need to,
office changes.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes the
pressure of
office,
perks of office
could be overwhelming.
Office changes. It's a different thing. When you say you sit out there, it's a different thing when you sit in.
Precisely. Precisely. And I know somebody who said that to me. In fact, on this Good Morning Nigeria, before the person got into the other side, I don't want to call the person's name. The person was very vocal. Yes. When he crossed over to the other side, he was on Good Morning, and I put a question across. He was all cold and warm, and I'm like, "What happened to you?" When we got out of the site, he said, "Claire, you don't want to know what happened to me."
Politicians will say you're observing table manners.
What
table manners?
Okay, let's leave it. But we must say this before we go. The issue Bobrisky, Idris Okuneye, the allegations is making, and again, Victor. This is your bit. You cover this area for us.
Well, the Minister of Interior had released a statement, a very tough sounding statement yesterday to say this will be investigated, set up a committee headed by the Permanent Secretary, and that if anyone is found guilty, it will not go unpunished. So we just wait and see.
I mean, but, well, Chukwudi, you are the reviewer.
I'm the reviewer, but actually I'm not very deep in this story. Yes, when I saw it, maybe it's my old-fashioned, attitude to life. There are some people I read about and I say they does not quite add value to the things that I want to prepare for myself. But as you said, I'm the reviewer. I should get to know about it. At the end of the day, we are saying all these traits being shown by some people, do they add value to the kind of life we want to be associated with? That is what the question Africa keeps asking in the face of the turbulent change in attitudes, you know? Because what you get to see, read, and hear from the social media, they are simply dumbfounding. They're just dumbfounding things. It's as if it's no longer our lives. You understand? So Bobrisky matter and you know his Corey is something that we should always put a mirror on and say, do these attitudes reflect our character? If anybody has deviated from whom we have always been known to be, can we please?
But it's no longer about Bobrisky now,
Bobrisky,
but
yes.
the fact that, well, I'm not saying facts now, but the allegation
exchanged hands, according to
that
him.
people could be sent to jail and they don't actually go to jail. They don't actually go to jail.
It's actually become a very big story.
Yes.
I promise to look more into it because now you are making me feel that
All right.
it is a newsroom matter
Chukwudi,
properly.
I'm going to set it off the set with the question. Did you visit the bakery while coming to the studio this morning? Because I see a moustache painted with.
Well, we're sure it's not a kiss.
They have to reissue.
Did the camera get his moustache?
She's seeing the wrong things.
Did you see the camera?
I think the person who makes your glasses will need to revisit the laboratory.
The camera won't do you the honors.
We'll see you tomorrow. All right, let's go for a short break. We'll be right back.
Vocals for us. It could be one of your songs, by the way. People fall in love in mysterious ways. So why did they call you Evil Child?
They called me that when I was in school. That was my nickname then in school.
Any reason in particular why they called you Evil Child?
Yeah, because I was actually one of the brilliant students.
Oh, say, mommy! That answer right there, you must be, if it's not on this board, problem. That means the people that answer this survey, they have body odor. Hey.
NTA Television College Jos, with a pedigree of producing indelible professionals in the media space and an affiliate of the prestigious Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria, for the award of degree in mass communication, calls on prospective candidates to leverage on the following courses it offers for 2024-2025 academic session. BSc Mass Communication, those with minimum admissible score of 180 and above who sat for the 2024 JAMB/UTME and direct entry, while 100 to 179 minimum admissible score can apply for the National Innovation Diploma NID in Film and Television Production, Broadcast Journalism and Television Engineering. For more inquiries, visit our website or call 0803 383 4343. Announcer, Registrar.
We all get that party where they get your back anytime or day. E go carry a matter for head like say na your own. Na so GoTV tanda for your side as your party for correct enjoyment. We not a tear pocket. For this GoTV Super Plus Golden Window, you fit touchlight all the 380 Premier League games, correct local shows, and better film. We day for you. Make your sharply upgrade or recharge your GoTV on top Super Plus to enjoy every today. The Super Plus Golden Window don't come out money now. No do yourself, oh. GoTV. Love it.
The counsel of our fathers.
My advice to these young people is please do not take us back to those harrowing days. You probably do not know what it is.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation together.
We must all join hands to work hard so that we build a country for our grandchildren.
My hope is that we develop as a nation where every citizen is given his due right. There is transparency, honesty, and integrity.
Put the interests of this country first and foremost. Interests of Nigeria is being one nation, one people.
The need, if I mean, to put things right, things that have gone wrong before, to try and put right. for this, for the love of country.
This Saturday, Chelsea,
Jackson, 1-0. This is Matoma.
Brighton,
And well there. Madueke, Chelsea looking for another early goal in this half. And they've got it. Big chance, big goal. João Pedro.
Chelsea versus Brighton. Live on Sporty TV.
Sportybet sponsors coverage of the English Premier League.
Okay, this is Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. Let's remind you, and to begin our conversation on the 79th Onga review of President Tinubu's address, here is a background report put together by State House correspondent Abdurrahman Usman Jubrila.
This is the climax of the annual global event, countries giving their national statements. Vice President Kashim Shettima standing in for President Bola Tinubu with a well-scripted national statement and a rich content focusing on contemporary global challenges and practical recommendations. First, Nigeria reminded the world leaders that the United Nations stands for inclusiveness anchored on the tripod of peace, sustainable development, and human rights.
Addressing the root causes of conflict is often the first step towards providing long-term solutions. Clearly, some of the root causes of conflict are social in nature, including poverty, hunger, ignorance, inequality, and exclusion, as well as other forms of injustice.
Expressing worry about the main objectives of the United Nations and how it could sustain the global body's relevance and resilience, lamenting the return of unconstitutional changes of government in some African countries.
Conflict resolution is the main reason why the UN exists, but the task of prevention becomes all the more difficult when conflict becomes normalized, when even the condemnation of violence and civilian casualties and calls for a ceasefire are somehow regarded as controversial. As we emphasize at the Abuja high-level ministerial meeting, we must renew our focus on conflict prevention.
Calling for reforms in the international financial architecture and a transparent multilateral trading system, hoping the adoption of the Pact for the Future will change the narrative, asking the UN to prioritize debt forgiveness for Nigeria and other developing countries from creditors and multilateral financial institutions.
Climate change is a driver of insecurity, which also poses a veritable challenge to sustainable development. A few weeks ago, large areas of my country were inundated by seasonal flood waters, including one of our largest cities, Maiduguri in the northeast. Other parts of Nigeria also experienced similar tragedies, occasioning the loss of lives and property. We need not remind ourselves to remain faithful to the implementation of the commitments that we all gave voluntarily at the various COP meetings. Failure to do so is merely to postpone the inevitable. No country is immune from the effects of climate change.
Other world leaders at the session made statements aimed at addressing global concerns.
I stand before you in these whirlwinds, convinced of two overriding truths. First, the state of our world is unsustainable. We can't go on like this. And second, the challenges we face are solvable. But that requires us to make sure the mechanisms of international problem solving actually solve problems.
It is time to invest more in building trust and practicing dialogue. Constant dialogue is a powerful weapon for all governments have in their hands.
Today, the United States and Vietnam are partners and friends, and it's proof that even from the horrors of war, there's a way forward. Things can get better.
The Nigeria's statement insisted on bold reforms in the United Nations Security Council, with a view to giving Nigeria and other African countries permanent seats at the Council.
Well, very, very interesting and engaging outing there for Nigeria, and indeed, of course, very powerful responses coming from the world leaders. Thank you, Abdul Rahman Jibrila, for bringing us this excerpt. And once again, if you've just joined us, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service. And our conversation is a review of President Tinubu's outing at the 79th Anga. So let me begin with our introductions. Let me welcome very warmly Ambassador Usman Saki, who is former Deputy Permanent Representative to the United Nations, and a familiar face, and I'm very glad that you are in for this discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We also have here another ambassador, Bolaji Alade Akinremi, Director, Economic Trade and Enforcement Department, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We're very glad you could join us for this conversation.
Good morning. Thank you so much.
Let me also introduce here in the studio Kopep Dabugat, International Development Worker, Civil Society Expert and International Affairs Analyst. He is currently General Secretary of the West African Civil Society Forum, WACSOF. Thank you again for joining us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you and good morning.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much once again. And this is a very important conversation for all of us, given the prospects, it will have not just for Nigeria, but for the ECOWAS sub-region. And I'd like to start with Ambassador Saiki, and then we may take our turns and all that. Can you outline for us the key prayers, coming from President Tinubu, not just as President of Nigeria, but of course Chairman of the ECOWAS sub-region, and probably evaluate the strength of it, given the platform, the global platform.
Thank you, Madam Adelabu and Chief. Thank you for this invitation to speak today. Like you say, these are very important issues, important moment in Nigeria's world outlook and engagement. And I think it's very important that we should congratulate the Nigerian delegation led by His Excellency Kashim Shettima, GCON Vice President, who stood in for the President. And the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Honorable Minister, Ambassador Yusuf Maitamatugar, for leading our delegation. We have achieved some landmark, events, there in terms of the high-level activities that we engage in, and also bilateral meetings on the margins of the General Assembly. But you have asked about the significance or the high point. I think the high point in President Tinubu's statement delivered by Vice President Shettima is the idea of governance. He has emphasized in his speech about the dangers that are facing democracy today. That is, if governments, democratic governments, could not deliver the basics and essentials of life to the people, then democracy itself becomes questionable, and its utility and purpose and functions becomes diluted and really becomes rather unsustainable in terms of the perception of the people, whether in the cities or villages or anywhere for that matter. Governance is at the heart of peace and security. Governance is at the heart of development, at the heart of resolving climate change, is at the heart of resolving regional and international issues. So where governments fail, you find vacuums being created, and these vacuums continue to perpetuate themselves and to expand and to create more problems. And I think if you look at, compare the statements of the Secretary General and that of the Vice President, they are in tandem in terms of commitment and the political will to resolve issues using the mechanisms of government and also using the platforms of multilateralism to address them. Within that context, the President's speech highlighted the importance of climate change, particularly in the Sahel and in Nigeria in terms of the natural disasters that are taking place of recent, and also in terms of meeting national and international commitments towards mitigation and adaptation, and applying globally approved normative processes to resolve
commitments to COP.
Commitment to COP,
okay.
Exactly, that is one. And the UN Convention on Climate Change also is very important. Let us note the Tokyo outcomes and others. So the third issue I think being highlighted here is the idea of collective responsibility in terms of addressing issues like the debt structure or the debt inequality or the debt trap into which developing countries of the South are falling into. Without resolving the issue of debt and capital flight from our countries, there cannot be a meaningful and sustainable question of development in our countries, simply because capital is needed to stay in our countries in order to industrialize, to address our power deficit, to address our human capital development, to reduce poverty, to create employment, and so forth. So the General Assembly offers the opportunity for engagement and creating partnerships, and also of networking with other countries, with international organizations, and even private sector. You recall Vice President Shetima met with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, where I think pledges of about, is it 200 or 320 million US dollar investment was made. So these sort of outings reinforce confidence in the country and also convey the sense of purpose and deliberate action on the part of the leadership of the country towards reaching out to people and establishing the right conditions for partnership with other countries and other partners. So as you say, this is very important for Nigeria, and I think we should all collectively congratulate.
I'm sorry, are they in line of priority?
Yeah.
Did you give in line of priority?
Well, in line of, yes, first governance is,
yes,
is critical to everything.
Yes, okay.
And then addressing the challenges of climate change and debt relief. Okay. And stemming the capital flight, I think is important.
Okay.
Very good.
All right. Thank you very much, Ambassador Seriki. Okay, let me let you rest a while and get to Ambassador Akinremi. We have taken what we have to the world. We have made our own statements, pitched our own ideas. But what should be the lessons for Nigeria, given after days of speeches and commitments and all of those? What should Nigeria take home from this whole process?
Well, thank you so much for inviting us. And Ambassador Seriki has said a lot about the Mr. President's speech delivered by the Vice President. For Nigeria as a whole, you must know that the UN General Assembly is a pivotal gathering of world leaders, diplomats, and representatives of different countries. And now that Nigeria has taken part again this year, because it's not every country that go to the General Assembly every year, and it's not every country that is represented even at the principal level. The UN continued throughout the year. Majority of the job is done by the expert, and then the political leaders come to give the muzzle to it. Nigeria must know that he has a global role to play, and destiny has placed upon his shoulder to be the leader in Africa of the black race, and we must always carry this with pride, with dignity, both at the United Nations and when we get back home. What is the significance of this? It means we cannot be floppy or sloppy about the governance at home if we call for governance at the international arena to be up to their duties and responsibilities and obligations. It means we must realize that whatever we say at the international stage, they are looking at us, whether we keep up to it at home. So commitment, even in governance at home, must also be adhered to by government. And this is what you take out there to show your priorities, to show that you are keeping to your responsibility at home, and you are ready to align with other countries globally to fulfill international expectations. As you know, the UN General Assembly is very dynamic and is changing. Ambassador Sariki has mentioned the participation of the private sector. From Nigeria also, there's a huge private sector participation in this high-level week. And so you have a lot of side events that are organized by Nigerians. They must have taken there what they have done at home, and they are looking for collaboration outside there. Back home, there are a lot of events on economic. Before now, the UN General Assembly used to, the high level particularly, used to focus essentially on political issues. But now, economic issue is the deal. So even in speeches that you hear, you heard about illicit financial flows from the Vice President's statement. It is essentially by private sector, multinational. So all of these things are linked, and it is a call to responsibility. It is a call to collaboration. It is a call to fulfillment of what you have promised the people. It is a call to development, you know. So if you ask me about Nigeria, it is to remind Nigeria that it is not for nothing that you are the largest population in Africa, you are the largest black nation, and you are the biggest economy. You must not slide back. And our government is very aware of this responsibility. They carry it with every sense of responsibility and duty. And you have seen that in the reforms by Mr. President. All of these are gathering together because it doesn't make sense just to go to the UN platform to make so much noise.
It becomes a jamboree.
Otherwise, it becomes a jamboree. And you must note that Mr. President has paid attention to local development in Nigeria. That's why he hasn't gone personally. It's not for any other reason. You are aware of the flood in Maiduguri. As soon as he arrived, he went there personally, you know, to show solidarity with the people, you know. And when Mr. President moves, you know, the entourage is larger. And that means the budget is also curtailed. All of these are in the thinking of the government that we need to conserve funds because people are really tightening their belt, and government must not be frivolous in spending.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador Bolaji Alade Akinremi. Thank you. Let's bring in Mr. Dabugat into the conversation, and I'd like for us to, you know, look at the points, you know, that the items, the prayers that were raised at this global, platform, because the UN is a multilateral institution that brings together, global minds and global interests. And Ambassador Seriki mentioned governance and the dangers of that might, emanate from, bad governance to democracy. And in the prayers presented by our president, there was also reference to the issue of curtailing small arms and light weapons and all that. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, can we speak to that? And it is, how do you see the response, of members to the president's, appeal, in that regards?
Thank you so much for this question. I think from my own part, I would start by, saying that I think the speech of Mr. President was very strong and very, very on point. And the fact that, he stayed back to face domestic issues shows some level of commitment to the problems, addressing the problems of the country. Now, within the speech of the President at the UN General Assembly, I think some things strike me very, very much. I always say, just like Ambassador has mentioned, Nigeria, should take that leadership of Africa. I think in this speech, Nigeria didn't just take leadership of Africa, but of the developing world, because it mentioned several things that really do not just impinge on the development of Africa, but on the development of the entire developing world. One is on the reform of the UN Security Council, which is a long-running discussion, and in this case, Nigeria went straight to say Nigeria deserves a seat on the Security Council, and I think that is really very, very important. Linking up with that also, there was a discussion of equality, fairness in the multilateral system of the world. I mean, severally across, whether it is the UN, the African Union, the ECOWAS, there is that clamor for reform, you know, also linking up with the issues of undemocratic changes of government, you know, in Africa, in West Africa particularly, you know, he harped on the need for democracy, and not just having democratic systems, but having democratic systems that deliver on economic needs. I think, thirdly, he called on the need to address terrorism and insecurity challenges. You know, and
sorry, yes. Because I had asked, I had asked what specifically was the request in terms of addressing the issue of governance, because even within that context of prayers, the president also mentioned the incident of coup, you know, military coups, and referenced Niger, and we know that, I mean, the efforts at the ECOWAS community, yes, you know, indeed, has been trying to bring these countries together. So what was the response, or the request, the help, you know, that is being solicited from that global platform?
Yes, I think one of the things I was coming to that is the straight request for debt relief, you know, for, you know, the developing world. And that is, you know, again linking up with the fact that democracy has not been able to deliver on these economic needs. He mentioned that a lot of these countries are suffering under the debt burden because much of their resources go into debt service. Okay. So they cannot really sustain the demands of governance, you know. And so those, I think, for me, stand out as very, very clear demands. You know, this idea of Nigeria being the big brother, it's a good thing, it's a fancy thing for Nigeria. But sometimes, as a big brother, you also have to remember that you are also a human being, you know, and demand for, you know, a space to act that big brother. And I think Nigeria demanded for that space very, very clearly. Looking also at connecting this with the last year's speech at the UN General Assembly, you will see that the narrative is consistent. It's almost the same speech, but beyond that, this speech has a lot of context and has a lot of specificity as to the demands that Nigeria has. Again, linking up with the other African countries' speeches at the UN General Assembly, Nigeria clearly took the lead because a lot of the countries stopped at Africa. I mean, it was a similar, you know, narrative through the entire African countries. But Nigeria's own went to a global level to demand all these things on behalf of the global poor. So I think this was a very
So for you, that relief is core.
Yes.
You want to
once again? Well, it's that relief is core, but the first thing he mentioned was a seat on the UN Security Council. So I'm going to ask Ambassador Seriki, if we take this one after the other, how important, just what does it mean for Nigeria, for instance, to be on the UN Security Council? If I understand particularly that you are not going to have the veto that those on that council already enjoy.
Yeah. Well, Nigeria's position on the reform of the Security Council has been very consistent, all along. And it is in line with the African position. The Azuluni consensus actually, guides for the time being how Africa should respond and approach the issue of the reform of the Security Council. Mind you, the reform is not only additional membership, but also addressing the question of the veto power. What is the morality behind 5 countries holding the rest of the world, the entire world, hostage to their whims and caprices? Just by pressing the button no, you have now derailed everything, regardless of the moral purpose or moral justification of the cause. For instance, calling for a ceasefire in conflict, like Mr. Vice President, like Mr. President said in his speech, should not be normalized to say, no, you will not call for ceasefire. In fact, making a call for ceasefire in conflict to become a crime in itself is really to detract the entire world from the moral high ground of conflict prevention. And the President's speech emphasized that one of the principal purposes of the United Nations is peace and security and conflict prevention. So Nigeria's claim to a seat, a permanent seat, in the Security Council is the morality behind our foreign policy of non-interference in other countries' affairs, respect for other countries' sovereignty, independence, and integrity, and the peaceful resolution of conflicts. And we have demonstrated this from 1960, when we went into the Congo to lead the United Nations peacekeeping operations. And up to a few years ago, up to the time of President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, we have consistently maintained that posture of going to other countries to restore and to keep the peace. Therefore, this flagship operation of Nigeria's foreign policy merits the consideration of Nigeria to become a permanent member. If 2 seats are to be given to Africa, there is no question that one of these seats must come to Nigeria. Now, on the question of the veto, the United States recently issued a statement that they favor 2 seats for Africa in the permanent category, but they qualified it or conditioned it again that it will not be a veto-wielding seat. Now, African countries are very reluctant to take that up because they are insisting that they also have the right. You cannot create 2 permanent categories today. One category having permanent the veto power and another not having the veto power. You either extend the veto power to all permanent members or you abolish it. And I think abolishing it will be far better for the multilateral system, for global peace and security, for achieving sustainable development, and for removing discrepancies in the international system than keeping the veto power. The veto power is anachronistic and is demonstrative of the misuse of power, particularly by 5 nuclear-wielding countries.
Can I ask you on the veto power? Because since you've been hitting on that veto power, does it vitiate the principles of multilateralism? Because that's the basis on which the UN is founded.
Yeah, it does. And consistently, since the 1960s to today, a number of issues that could not be resolved in terms of nuclear disarmament, for instance, or the conflict in Palestine, for instance, or even the issue of which country should be taken to the International Criminal Court or not, are all hindered by the use of the veto by one country or the other. Resolution of conflict is a moral duty enshrined in various chapters of the United Nations Charter. Anything that vitiates that, anything that detracts from that, anything that stops that must be regarded as inimical to the maintenance of international peace and order and security. Therefore, addressing the veto power becomes a moral duty and also a normative and legal duty for us to examine it from the perspectives of the relevance or of that prerogative to the Charter of the United Nations. Removing it will actually conduce towards a negotiated and mutually approved resolution of issues in the world today. And the other issue I think that our delegation raised in Mr. President's speech is the importance of redressing the historical injustice that is done to Africa in terms of our marginalization. Going to the Security Council is not a symbolic gesture. It is a concrete testament and affirmation of the arrival of the African continent to a level of acceptance and to a level of relevance in the international system, whereby you can sit at the table with other countries and decide on global governance matters. So it is very important, the cultural, historical, and even racial dimension of the reform of the Security Council is highlighted. You assign only 3 non-permanent positions to the entire African
country.
And then yet you expect us to have reliance and confidence in the international multilateral system. It's not done. And one other claim, finally, before I give you the floor back the floor, is in that speech of Mr. President, he raised the issue of Palestine, of Gaza, of the conflict in Sudan and other places. You cannot resolve conflicts when you do not address the underlying issues, social, economic, and other factors that drive conflicts. So it was a very courageous, very pragmatic, non-combative, constructive, and forward-looking statement on the issue of conflict. And I think Nigerian political scientists, the media, journalists, and others should examine that statement very carefully and bring out the nuances that it entails towards the construction of a narrative of Nigeria's return to the leadership of Africa and the developing world, as Mr. Labugat said, whereby we can now hinge Nigeria's claim to leadership of Africa, not only ECOWAS, that is chaired by Mr. President, but actually, on the larger African continent and the global south. And that is what we will carry, I think, in October to the Commonwealth. Ambassador Akin, you know that I think, we are going to Samoa for the Commonwealth meeting. And I think these are things that we could carry over to that also, the other multilateral organizations. To forcefully place our claim to have the right to speak on global issues from the perspectives of Africa and the global south.
Ambassador Seke, thank you. And I think that I was even surprised when you didn't mention the issue of the permanent seat at the Security Council when you did it, because it was a major headline all over Nigeria requesting, and we have been doing that for some time to come. But there's no doubt, Ambassador Akinremi, that Nigeria is qualified, given the requirements. We participate actively in international peacekeeping missions, peace building. Of course, we are a member of the UN. UN. I don't know whether I don't know what number we are now, but we are a member of the UN Charter. We are obliged, to also be given, a space as a permanent member in the Security Council. But there are other issues that are emanating even from within our own, region, both at the, sub-region and at the African region. And these are the political and representational dynamics. Do you think that this time around, maybe our fellow African brothers will now come together, and allow Nigeria, or give Nigeria the vote, because Nigeria needs the vote, to get, to even be nominated
into the
Security Council.
Well, thank you for this point, but membership of the Security Council is not by nomination, and is not by confine on people.
But there are other countries who are also showing interest.
That's where I'm coming.
Yes.
Going by global history, over the years and century, power, or is what we call might is right. And you cannot be distracted by the discussion on the democratization of the Security Council. As a practitioner, I can tell you that the way it's going, countries need to take their mind off that for now, because the global issues are managed by those who felt that they have the capacity. And until you are able to assert yourself on the international scene, whereby you can disrupt it, they won't listen to you. So it is, I heard Ambassador Sariki mention about moral duty or moral right. That is true, but not when it comes to the Security Council. Because nations that have the capacity don't entrust, not just their foreign policy, but their defense and their livelihood and assistance just to anybody to care for. Rather, they want to look after you so that they be the one determining what you do. And it's because they felt it, and it clearly mentioned it, that these are nuclear power wedding nations. So it is not what they just give to you because you say you want it.
Okay, you must show capacity.
Something must happen. And this is the reality that developing countries have to come to. Africa in particular. Everyone that has this veto power for now in the Security Council have things that make them to feel that they are superior.
Nuclear.
And Africa cannot be going to China to queue for
daily bread,
as you have said, and expect them to have the same that China. They are just going to continue, as we say in the modern language, scoping you, just making you feel it's going to happen. This is the reality that we must come to, so that as we can now focus on developing ourselves to the extent that we will be recognized and we can call for a change. Different nations have different ways of asserting themselves in the international scene. And it's because they have excelled.
But that is not a requirement. That is not a requirement.
What you should ask yourself is that how does those who have veto power, how did they get it?
By force.
Might is right in the international system. We can only be gathering at the UN General Assembly. That's why they call it a talk shop. All right? And you must know that at the high level week, decisions are not taken. It is the expert who will continue at the committee level. So these 24 to 28, it's where the leaders open the discussions and give the direction to which they will go. There will be resolutions which will be negotiated and will be agreed to by consensus. Now, what veto tells you is that there is no consensus. And it says that this is the direction I will go, and if you try to oppose me, anything can happen. So a nation that will be capable of having veto power should be able to tell the whole world that if you oppose me, anything can happen. I'm capable of rocking the boat. We must tell ourselves the home truth, that it is high time that Nigeria come of age.
But Nigeria is capable of rocking the boat when you use your economic might, because these days it's not. No, I mean, we use our resources. It's
human resources.
We have our human resources.
For sure.
We have our resources. Africa
is a global
market.
Deputy General Secretary.
In terms of market, trade and investment, Africa is a destination for the world today.
Sorry, you don't get veto power by your market. None of them had such market apart from China when they got the veto power. There was Second World War.
Military might.
And some countries emerge. Japan was bombed, and Japan that has asserted itself in the whole of Asia could no longer raise his head. All right? Now alliance is swinging. Japan and US are together, okay? But will Japan have a veto power on the UN Security Council? What will China, what will India say? All right? South Korea. So in the Asia flank alone, there are a lot of nations that are clamoring, or they are silent now. I was in the United Nations General, I was in the permanent mission of Nigeria, just like His Excellency. I served after him. And we know very well that there are a lot of conglomeration, nations coming together to discuss this. But we also know the reality that something like a bang has to happen.
So, I don't know. Maybe we escalate conversation
I wanted to
yes.
take us off course a bit. Look.
No, please don't. Let's quickly.
I'm coming.
Sorry, I hope I'm not disrupting your...
No.
What does a nation lose by not identifying with the United Nations? Knowing that if it is about relations, bilateral, you can do that independent of the United Nations. Nations can do business. You don't have to go to the UN to do business. You can do business on your own. What does a nation lose? What does it gain, really?
Well, I think it's more around, being in a marketplace, and there's an association of, market women, for example, and you say you wouldn't join. There are a lot of, issues that can be negotiated through collectivity. I think it's always very instrumental, useful to come together with people. I mean, the world has become an interdependent
Even if you
world.
feel, you are not getting your fair share.
But then who do you trade with? I mean, that's where they go and negotiate, some of the things collectively. And then you go to the back and negotiate with some of them individually. It may not really work, I mean, almost all the nations of the world are part of the United Nations, So a lot of discussions happen there. And I think this is a system that has been constructed over time, over more than a century, and it has become like the norm within the international system. So it's something you can't escape at the moment, So it's only pragmatic that you just find a way to be constructive about your engagement in the multilateral system. But then I think this issue of the permanent seat on the UN Security Council is, as I said earlier, a long-running issue. I think since Kofi Annan, the idea of the need for reform of the UN has been muted. The discussions have been going on. At some point, it became very, very heated, and then it dies down. And it picks up momentum again, and then it dies down. I think Ambassador was just highlighting the fact that in the international system, it is a matter of your power gives you the space, And at the moment, there is no, overarching authority in the international system to say, okay, your power is too much, keep it aside. No. I have the power, so I can decide to act in certain ways, and there's nobody to check me. So how can you escape that? So I think the argument is very, very clear. Nigeria needs to now get down to business. Sit, build its elements of national power, build on its population, ensure that that population is driving its economic development, have control over its resources, and ensure that these resources are deployed, to drive development within Nigeria. In fact, interestingly, yesterday I had an argument with someone. He was talking about the Nigeria's foreign policy being anchored on Africa. You know, it is said that Africa is the centerpiece of Nigerian foreign policy. You know, which is true. Nigeria does a lot
Big brother.
for Africa. That big brother,
Yes, the
big brother thing. You
we are
know,
still
it
playing
does a lot of Africa for Africa. You know, but interestingly, you look at the feedback, you don't see much, you know, gain for Nigeria. You know, Nigeria needs to, you know, well, come up with a doctrine. The foreign policy is sound, but it needs to come up with a doctrine that operationalizes development, you know, into its foreign policy, real economic development for its people.
Thank you. Yes. Ambassador Seriki, we're back to you again. I would like you to also, you know, while answering the question I'm going to put to you, to talk about the Big Brother aspect, because it keeps coming, you know, recurring in conversations on international diplomacy and all that. Have we gotten to a stage where we have to review the Big Brother, you know, diplomatic policy? I mean, a foreign policy of Nigeria. But this is my question, just before you answer. Must there be a big bang from Nigeria for her, or even Africa, to be accepted as a permanent member in the Security Council? And I'm asking because to even be accepted, you need the big five, you know, the interest of the big five to say, okay, yes. And Nigeria now is, you know, aligning with some of those big fives. So yes, so are we likely to get the support of any of those members?
Yes, this is a discussion that is still continuing. It's not something that is going to momentarily happen, you know, this year or next year or in 10 years' time or whatever. So it is a continuous process.
For how long?
You know, well, that is for as long as the international community allows the issue to drag on indefinitely. And by international community here, basically you're talking of 2 or 3 countries, you know, in the Security Council. The United States, Great Britain, perhaps China and Russia. You know, France has indicated its commitment towards expanding the Security Council and even discussing renegotiating the veto power. When I was in New York, they have said that there is an issue of morality behind the veto power, and France recognized that. And they wanted to see if there will be a discussion around the use of the veto power, particularly the indiscriminate use to obstruct and block the cause of peace. And they raised that issue, really. But the other countries, Britain and France, Russia and China, did not actually readily come out to say, yes, we will do that. So the matter stopped there. So the onus now is on us, the other countries that want to see the global activities through a different prism, to say that, yes, we must discuss the veto power. Let us place it centrally on the agenda of the next General Assembly, for instance. Why should 4 or 5 countries determine the fate of the world? Remember, the United Nations consists of 193 member states, small and big countries. Don't their sentiments matter in the way the world is run? Because you cannot run the world by ignoring the interests, the concerns, and the needs of other countries. And that is what Nigeria is saying. So what Ambassador Akinremi was highlighting was this issue of realism in foreign policy, the doctrine of realism. But there are other doctrines also of morality, of causality, of cultural affinity and prerogative,
idealism
and so
as
different identities.
Yes.
So we can collapse them into a workable system to oppose it to the doctrine of reality, which necessitates that might is right. Our rejoinder should be, no, right is might. When you do things correctly and rightly, you are now actually demonstrating might without applying the instruments of violence, without applying the instruments of mass annihilation, mass destruction, which is really possession of nuclear weapons. So countries like Brazil, countries like Germany, countries like Japan, Argentina, Italy, Sweden, and others that have the aspirations to come into the Security Council are also examining their option to have the veto or not. So it is very critical, very important that Nigeria defines its interests and where it wants to go on this issue. And I think so far now we come to the big brother issue. We are working collectively within the family of African nations to find a way out. Perhaps there is a need to really revisit the Ezuluni consensus in terms of upgrading the perception based on recent developments. If the United States says they are amenable to the idea of 2 African countries to be on the Security Council, now let us refocus the argument on which 2 countries will be there.
Precisely.
And then whether we accept the position that we should not go there to expect the veto power, but to go there as non-veto members. We have to look at all these options and define them. And what sort of coalitions or affinities or collaborations will you build with other regional groupings? Because the conversation in the intergovernmental meeting on the reform of the Security Council is arranged along regional lines, including the European Union. All of them, they have opinions on the expansion of the Security Council along the lines of the number that is required, along the lines of the use of veto power, along the lines of responsibility that each member should bring, and along the line of civilizational and cultural values that the members will bring. So it's very important for us to look at all these things and aggregate our responses along clear factors that will determine the reform of the Security Council and the nomination or appointment of members into that group.
Ambassador Seki, thank you. Thank you. And when we come back from this short break, we'll also look at another very important prayer from Nigeria, well, from the ECOWAS chairman, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, which is on, the concern that some nations reverting to, unilateralism rather than, the multilateralism upon which the UN, is hinged. But that will be when we come back. We'll now begin to look at it. Let's take a short break. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria.
The Secretary to the Government of the Federation and Chairman Interministerial Committee on Nigeria's 64th Independence Anniversary, Senator George Akume FNIM-CON, wishes to announce the programs lined up for the celebration of Nigeria's 64th Independence Anniversary with the theme, Reflecting on the Past, Inspiring the Future, as follows. World Press Conference, Thursday, 26th September 2024. Venue, National Press Center, Radio House, Garki, Abuja. Time 10 a.m. Special Juma'at prayers, Friday, 27th September 2024. Venue, National Mosque, Abuja. Time 1 p.m. Interdenominational Church Service, Sunday, 29th September 2024. Venue, National Christian Center, Abuja. Time 10 a.m. Presidential broadcast, Tuesday, 1st October 2024. Time 7 a.m. 64th Independence Anniversary Parade, Tuesday, 1st October 2024. Venue, Presidential Villa. Time 10 a.m. All invited guests are to be seated by 9 a.m. Announcer Mohammed Idris FNIPR, Honorable Minister of Information and National Orientation, and Chairman, Media and Publicity Subcommittee.
The federal government of Nigeria wants vandals of national assets, electricity transmission towers, cables and other facilities to desist from this act of sabotage. Vandalism is a serious crime punishable under the law. Vandalizing electrical equipment will affect millions of Nigerians, including your loved ones. Remember that national assets belong to all of us, hence the need to protect them. Report all cases of suspicious movement around electrical facilities to security agencies. When you see something, say something. This message is from the Federal Ministry of Information and National Orientation in collaboration with the National Counter-Terrorism Center, NCTC, Office of the National Security Advisor.
I think Amaka should just move out of the house.
Yes. No. Standing out of the house is not the right thing to do.
Oh, there you go again with your sentimental family stuff.
Baby, if our aim is to stop this affair, it is best achieved under our roof.
You do something terrible, and you'll be acting innocent.
What are you going on about?
Don't ask me that question again. You couldn't even control yourself in the presence of our visitors.
What are you accusing me of, woman?
My son, I don't know how serious you are with my daughter, but there's something that needs to be done urgently before you move any further.
Anything, just anything, just say it. I'm ready to do anything.
There is a spell that needs to be removed.
A spell?
Family forever. The story of our lives.
The counsel of our fathers.
I will urge and advise our younger generation to use talent and brain to sort out problems, not arms.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation together.
The race to qualify for the biggest football competition in Africa is on, the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations. 48 teams in 12 groups, with only the top 2 teams in each group qualifying for the African Cup of Nations in 2025 in Morocco. Don't miss the action, suspense and unrivaled coverage on AfroSport TV and its affiliates partners across Nigeria, starting from September 2024 to November 2024. AfroSport, your freedom of sport.
This Sunday, Roma. Venezia. Roma versus Venezia. Live on Sporty TV.
SportyBet sponsors coverage of the Italian Serie A.
Thank you for staying with us on Good Morning Nigeria, where we've been having quite an interesting conversation on
the background.
Nigeria's outing at the UN General Assembly. And we've had a more robust one behind the scenes. But Claire has set us a tone for the conversation to progress. And I want to just ask Ambassador Kiremi, while bearing that in mind, would you think that Nigeria's address to the UN General Assembly positions it to make well enough, in good stead, to make the kind of demands that it is making? Or do you think that we should, shift some other time, maybe shift focus and address some other things?
Thank you so much. Nigeria's speech this year is well seated, well positioned, and I think thumb up for Mr. President, as well delivered by His Excellency the Vice President. One way I will look at this is that it is a confirmation of the direction that this administration is going on the 4D diplomacy. And this is to emphasize Nigeria's strength. And if you actually wanted a seat at the
table,
you must speak to your strength and you must emphasize. One key element that will help Nigeria in future, and as it is doing now, is its diaspora. And Nigerians, whether home or abroad, must continue to have their mind on their motherland, how it will emerge. And so I know for sure that in future, our diaspora, working with us at the motherland, will make Nigeria to emerge on the global scene that will be respected. What Vito gives you is actually international respect. And you can earn this respect only when you work on your strength. And Nigeria has got the strength, we've got the demography, and His Excellency, the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs, Maitama Yusuf Tuga, has really steered the ship of Nigerian foreign policy in this direction to work on the strength of our nation. So if we come back to the speech or the statement that Nigeria has delivered this year, there are some elements that are different from what you have been saying in the usual year. I mean, in the years before. We now begin to say that we are not just qualified for this, but if you don't give us, or if you don't listen to us, you too will not have peace. So there is an element of we also saying that we have a position. We are not begging, it's not with cap in hand. It is more assertive. This statement is more assertive. And the delivery is super. The delivery is super. So the whole world listen. I have read online international comment about Nigeria. You know, people are saying that, oh, it's time to listen to Nigeria. Because we are very in the heart of the black race, in the heart of Africa. And we have played our diplomacy in such that no African country can say we're inconsequential. So when you talk about the big brother, it's not a waste. It's never a waste.
Never a waste.
So, because you must show to people that you have the shoulder that they can lean on. And you must show that you are consistent in what you are doing, not just because of what you wanted, but what you think you can render. So Nigeria has the capacity to lead the black race. Nigeria has the capacity to lead Africa. And Nigeria has positioned itself globally. And Nigerians now, I'm talking about our diaspora, are going to do us the great honor. We must not underplay that. Before I will stop on this, don't forget that Nigeria is still the largest democracy in Africa. And Mr. President said this in this speech, that we have had democracy and electoral process consistently for over 2 decades, unbroken. There are few African countries that can say this. So we are the largest democracy in Africa. Not just that. In terms of development, you still cannot rubbish Nigeria, even though we have our own domestic challenges. But the fact remains that as we are aspiring very high, and we are not doing badly at all. We are not doing badly at all. So economically, we are improving. The policies of government, the reforms, have really brought confidence, even from the international scene. You know, we are paying the price now, but very soon we'll begin to reap.
Hopefully. Hopefully, Ambassador Keremi, hopefully. Let me also ask, is the UN really a multilateral institution? I ask because, I mean, if we look back at its origin, the Westphalia Treaty, which granted those warring states the freedom to, collective interaction, freedom to have, dealings with whatever and solve issues. Today, in terms of trade, is there anything multilateral in trade, in international trade? You look at how countries are choosing what to do. Now, rather than collective response to issues of conflict and violence, some countries are choosing to fuel it. Instead of collective response to issues of poverty, the international financial system is increasing debt of African countries. So is UN still relevant as a multilateral institution?
Yes, I would say yes. Why? Because, first of all, we didn't touch much on the history of the United Nations. I think it's very important to recognize that United Nations was born out of collective effort, to stem the tide of international, bullying, so to say, by Germany, Japan, and other allies that were trying to take over other countries, And from there, you see how after the Second World War, when these countries came together, they put together the Marshall Plan, which led to the development of the the rebuilding of Europe, after the Second World War. And they put in millions of money, put in a lot of expertise to ensure that that happened. We see how the European countries are continuing to develop.
Yes, which was also part of the Woodrow peace plan.
Yes, exactly. And then, of course, even within this speech of Mr. President, this issue was highlighted. Yes, the United Nations system is not perfect. It's a work in progress, so to say. Just like from the First World War, you see how the UN, the League of Nations, transformed into the United Nations. And now there is this discussion again. And this discussion is more around people. Internationally, there is a lot of shift towards, the aspiration to have people at the center of whatever nations do. The speech of Mr. President highlighted the need for countries to shun individualism and protectionism. These are narratives that can bring about discussion on a fairer system of multilateralism. If you read the UN Charter and read commentaries on the different sections, you will realize that it was actually the only thing we had to do at that point, to put together this system. Now again, we are at a point of discussing the renegotiation of the system. And as my elder brothers have said, this process is currently more aspirational than something that is clear at hand. So we need to keep discussing and need to keep raising these issues. And lastly, I would draw attention to the credentials of the United Nations in driving development. Within the UN framework over the years, there has been initiatives that have mobilized resources to support less privileged countries or less developed countries.
Yes, but it's selective.
There has been...
It's been selective.
Yes, sometimes it is selective, and that is the imperfect nature of the system, But there is already something in place. What we need is to
improve it.
Yeah.
Ambassador Sereke, is our president, spot on when he raised the issue of dangers of, member countries, reverting to isolationist or protectionist, principles?
Yes, he was spot on, and I think that also was reflected in the sentiments of the speech of the Secretary General of the United Nations himself in terms of collective responsibility, collective interest, and strengthening the multilateral framework. Coming back to your question, is it necessary to have multilateralism? Is the United Nations important? I think that is a very important question, Claire, and we should address it very pragmatically. The opening statement, the opening paragraph of Mr. President's statement actually asked, should the United Nations remain relevant and resilient or not? And that depends on the outlook and attitude of member states. Let us remember, the UN is a member states initiative. Not just as an organ, it is driven by the opinions and idiosyncrasies of member states. So if they decide to act individually instead of collectively, then it defeats and vitiates the purpose of the United Nations. But if they decide to act and work in concert, united towards certain objectives of development, of peace and security, maintenance and promotion of human rights and so forth, then the world becomes a better place. So our commitment towards multilateralism, which Mr. President's statement reiterated, is actually the aspiration of the rest of the world. You cannot do today without the United Nations because countries will be talking across each other and not to each other. And you cannot have a platform whereby you can resolve global issues or global challenges like climate change, pandemics, and other things without the facilities provided by the United Nations.
But,
Let us
sorry,
remember,
sir,
yeah.
in some instances, United Nations have also been silent, you know,
Mm.
in dealing with countries that have,
Yeah.
you know, contravened the truth.
Well, that is the way the membership, you know, is rather skewed in a disproportionate manner. Today, for instance, member states have failed to stop the killings in Gaza.
Exactly.
You know, member states have failed to really bring an end to the conflict in Sudan. Member states have failed to really restore democracy in countries where military takeovers have taken place. But that does not bring into question the relevance of the United Nations, but it just highlighted or highlights the weakness of the system, whereby there is a disproportionate, you know, wielding of power in the system, where one bloc really insists on having its way, and the other bloc always moralizes about having a collective responsibility towards issues. Now, the president's speech, if you look at the analysis, if you do a content analysis, for the first time in many years, I can see the imprint of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I congratulate you, Ambassador, and through you, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, for taking charge of the speech this year. It's very professional. It did not wander around, you know, it didn't wander around all over,
Yes,
you know,
yes.
and in a very wishy-washy manner.
Precisely.
It went straight to the point,
issues.
to issues. And it is crafted in such a way that going through, you know that there is a professional touch.
Yes.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs sat in New York and I think insisted that it must be so. And I think that is how it should be. Allow the Minister of Foreign Affairs to take charge of foreign policy, to take charge of diplomacy, to take charge of international conferences. Any other contribution coming from any other quarter must be supplementary and also complementary to what the Minister of Foreign Affairs does. And I think Mr. President should take note from this outing that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is there to reinforce and to strengthen his office, his capacity, and his leadership position. Now, I'll give you another. If the Minister of Foreign Affairs at the initial stages had been in charge of the discussions in ECOWAS at the end of last July, August, over the issue of Niger, the situation would not have been like that. But I suspect the minister was bypassed by certain interests to establish this combative narrative about use of force and all these things. Ambassador King Remy, if you put him in a room and tell him to draw up a scenario of responses, what you will get is very professional, based on practice and precedents and antecedents.
And diplomacy.
And exactly. So he will give you stage-by-stage approach towards resolution of this issue as a career diplomat. And the last item on his list will be the threat of use of force or the use of sanction or cutting of electricity supply or closure of airspace and things like that. He will give you a graduated response in terms, and each one he will now analyze and locate them within the probability of achieving a goal and result. And that is how foreign policy diplomats are trained. So the impasse we found ourselves in Niger would not have happened. But now, I think from the benefit of hindsight, the Minister of Foreign Affairs is taking charge. And I think from this statement, you know that there is an imprint of professionalism and expertise there. So I think, you know, it's very good that we should do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Seriki. As we gradually wind up this conversation, let me quickly ask Ambassador Akinremi. Now, Ambassador Seriki has held the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, so I shouldn't be asking now whether you think that this has gone in the the right way it should go. Apparently, it's the right way for you. So, but do you think Nigeria should do something? You have said that to get the attention of superpowers, you have to do something, or show the capacity to do something that, could startle them. Could that be? I've seen in recent years, South Africa take on, BRICS. I've seen in recent years, South Africa want to go to the international court against Israel, knowing the ties that exist, Israel, America, and the rest of them, showing itself as a force in Africa. Should Nigeria begin to consider things like that? Look sideways, for instance, away from Bretton Woods, look elsewhere, and on like that.
Thank you so much. There has been consistency in our foreign policy since the day that His Excellency Tafawa Balewa mounted the rostrum at the United Nations. And like our brother said, Africa is still the centerpiece of Nigeria's foreign policy. One thing we must know when it comes to foreign policy, diplomacy, and international relations is that it's not a dash. It's a long run. So there must be consistency, and there must be the drive. And a lot depends on your internal domestic policies, how you are able to stand as a nation. Secondly, how you are able to connect, networking with other nations. Absolutely. Because you cannot be everywhere at every time, but you need a lot of allies. You need a lot of collaboration where nations can have your back and where you can have other nations back, and they know that we are in a league. Nations speaks for each other once they have the confidence of each other. But the fact that you are friendly with this one does not necessarily mean that his enemy is your enemy. You must be able to play such diplomacy where you stand for your interest and you are able to show that you are reliable. So for us, our foreign policy is moving in a direction that assures us that we are heading very well and we are heading to our target. And Nigeria will have a place of honor in the international system. And Nigeria should have confidence in their government, in their leadership, to be able to represent them very well at the international scene.
Just in less than 60 seconds, what is the follow-up that Nigeria needs to do now?
The permanent mission in New York is on standby to act on every inch of this speech through all the committees. There are 5 committees in the UN, and they will make sure that these interests are well represented and the resolutions to back them up are given to it. So we must strengthen our permanent mission in the UN. We must strengthen the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, not just with money, but with a lot of training and with a lot of programs and with a lot of listening. Like the ambassador said, they must let the experts lead. When this is allowed, you see great results, just as we have seen.
All right. It's time to go.
Thank you.
Let me thank you very much, Ambassador Bolaji Alade Akinremi, Director, Economic Trade and Investment Department at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I enjoyed your company this morning. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so much. Pleasure.
Let me also thank Ambassador Usman Seriki, former Nigerian Deputy Permanent Representative to the United Nations. Always a pleasure having you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for coming.
Always a pleasure being with you.
And then finally, Kopep Dabugat, International Development Worker and civil society experts, among many other caps, including that of Waxoff. We thank you very much for your time and thoughts on Good Morning Nigeria this morning.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure sharing my thoughts.
Victor,
So,
I told you we were going to have a robust conversation. So I've become a prophet.